This is possibly one of the most insane posts in the history of sim racing. You have a comment that's been taken out of context. You have people commenting on that comment that's been taken out of context and then inventing a complete narrative that I don't even know if is true or makes any sense. And then you have people completely reinterpreting and rewriting the entire cultural history of sim racing, with loads of people clapping them on and thinking that everything's okay. Now, before we get into this, I do want to say that sim racing, I think, for the most part, is really quite good. There's actually a lot of people helping other sim racers on there. There's loads of simrigs you can look at if you're into that. There's posts when new developments and sim games come out. It's actually not the worst place, and a lot of people do actually really help each other. So this is not a me hating on sim racing thing. This is a observation of what I think has started to happen more and more in sim racing, which is just a sort of reality distortion field that's mind-blowing. So what we're going to do is we've got the page here with the post, and it's LMU devs reaction to iRacing updates, and then you have a screenshot of the this. So, LMU developers, apparently I've not been on it, they have a Discord and they talk, and I think it's great for developers to just talk even if they say stuff you don't agree with. To comment on this, the dev time is limited. Some games like to drain your wallet by posting flashy features on YouTube and making people think less of other games instead of actually improving the product. Other games spend the dev time on implementing correct driving instead. For example, by having correct LMDH hybrid implementation. It's all about priorities, and we prioritise a good sim over flashy features that rarely ever matter, and in my opinion any gameplay feature is a waste of time as long as the experience of even doing a single lap on your own is nowhere near realistic yet. First things first, what you need to do with any conversation, argument or point someone's making is you need to try and take the most the least disingenuous view of it. So you go, oh, what's the most favourable interpretation of what's being said, and then what's maybe the least favourable, and then think about what's actually trying to be communicated. With that comment, there's not necessarily anything wrong about saying that some developers focus on a whole bunch of features that really are beside the point if your underlying physics in your game or underlying gameplay in the game don't work. That's not just for sim racing, that's for like all games. I mean, Microsoft Flight Sim 24, I love it, I'm a weirdo, I like to be punished. But for example, Flight Sim 24, it's got loads of great stuff in it, but if you can't load it, does that matter? With driving sims, you can have God knows what features, but if the tyres don't let you drive on the limit properly, well, that's probably the biggest issue with the simulator. And you could also argue that all the other aspects of a car, if the tyres don't work basically, are a little bit redundant. That's a reasonable argument to have, and I think it's perfectly fine for a developer to say that about other games and just be open about it. Also, I think it's worth saying, or personally, my personal view is, I think it's amazing to have developers just talk directly, whether it be on Discord or posts, and for them to just speak their mind, and I don't care if it upsets people. Do you remember with the original Assetto Corsa, Stefano got a bit annoyed on the forum with people that were constantly making stupid posts, and he went off on one? I think that's hilarious, and also I think it's just, he was just communicating what he thought and he was being direct. Same with maybe what's happened on the LMU Discord or just a developer talking. I think it's great having this actual, very immediate communication between the developer and more honest communication. And I think it's a much better situation having that and having things that might upset you and offend you or whatever than having the sort of Microsoft Forza approach where you have a corporate entity which is walled off and the only thing that comes out of it is some highly curated narrative that's just, if anything, it's just boring. It's like, guys, it's great that the developers are chatting with you guys and giving direct response. Sometimes you won't like those responses. So I really like developers communicating with people. Another thing that's worth pointing out is that, guys, the sim racing developers have a huge amount of respect for each other. they all know that they're all insane because they're all game developers working on simulators. If you are a decent artist or programmer, you don't work on driving simulators if you want to have a nice, easy job. You probably don't even work in the games industry unless you're really stupid. So they all have respect for each other. I know people that work at lots of different software companies, hardware companies, artists, programmers, in the sim industry, met loads of them, and I'd say almost always they have huge amount of respect for the different teams. They don't really have any actual beef against each other. You know, there'll be things that come up now and then, but really, for the most part, it's like they're all like, oh, we're just trying to make a living doing what we do. So it's really weird that sim racers or sim racing culture external to the developers kind of manufacture these like weird narratives. Now, what I think really happens, and this you see this all the time on the internet, is you have a sub-narrative that X company is evil in a certain way, a sort of simplification, and then something happens or a post made or something's taken out of context, and then that is used as a piece of evidence to assert that, oh, that company's evil or terrible, or they all have this unified thing against something. Whereas you just can't do that. It just doesn't work like that. You have to look at information bit by bit, point by point, and you'd have to go, oh, is that point valid? You can't just magically go, right, they've done this, so in this case, the developers posted this, so LMU clearly hate iRacing. It's like... If it's just, like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Now, where this gets even better is when you go through the comments and you have, of course, the traditional stuff like, looks like iRacing's living rent-free in his head. The rent-free thing is like a really, really weird saying. I mean, it's kind of a dismissive way of just saying that someone's thinking about something potentially. Also, again, I'm led to understand that this post is actually from a general conversation and it's not really just about iRacing. Just because iRacing is the bigger simulator, it's then been assumed that is the target of the thing. Or maybe iRacing did the new gravel stuff recently, so maybe people have associated it with that directly. But you don't necessarily know. So yeah, I mean. Also, the post is not really a bad point. It's a completely valid point. But we go through these comments here, and one thing I've really noticed in sim racing is in a year or so, there's been a massive narrative shift with iRacing and perception of iRacing. So I've been sim racing since like the 2000s, right? And since before iRacing. And it's definitely been the case that prior to 2020, iRacing categorically was like, oh, you can't criticise it. It's got the laser scan tracks. It's got all the best stuff. Nobody ever thinks any sim's perfect. But it's been pretty established that if anybody online, and even in some public spaces, was to say anything slightly critical about iRacing and say, really, it's not that realistic, or there's other older sims that actually are more realistic, you would get absolutely slaughtered. And as I say, it's only since, like, moving on through COVID, where you had loads of real-world drivers saying, yep, no, the tyres at the limit, that's not how they are. And then, like, Max Verstappen saying he likes the original Assetto Corsa, or like, it's only more recently that it's now, apparently in 6 months, the narrative has flipped over that, oh yeah, we can all agree that iRacing actually has a lot of tyre model issues at the limit. That was really not the narrative and completely unacceptable in the online space until very recently. I think actually the crux of it was that iRacing's they did a post themselves saying that they're going to change the tyres. So as soon as a developer, and this is not just iRacing, when any developer does a post saying that they're going to update something, it's basically an admission that the previous thing wasn't good. So all the fans of that simulator then have to go, oh shit, my reality's changing. the developers said that the previous thing's not good, but the new thing will be better. But now I can be negative about the previous thing. This is not just iRacing, as I say. This happens with all products and things. So since iRacing did that post a few months back, 6 months or so, with them saying, "Oh, this is what we're doing with the tyres, significant changes. We've hired some of the like original R Factor people." Now it's acceptable to be critical about it. It wasn't previously. So I don't know where this narrative is coming about now that apparently everybody was critical of iRacing. It's like they really weren't online. It was only in public spaces that they were particularly critical, like real drivers that you would speak to. And I would say I'm in a pretty good position to judge this because I know real world drivers. Talk to a lot of esports drivers. I talk to a lot of sim racers. I'm in the online space. I'm in the real world physical space. I'm all over the place in the sim racing land, and I've been for a long time. So I think I have a reasonable overview of this. But it's quite interesting. Either way, it's quite interesting to see how things shift around and change. But then you have to scroll all the way down here to Fast Nando, who said, "Man, this with no context is so effing funny. There's a whole conversation before this talking about features that both sims have, mainly hybrid implementation. He was actually speaking about LMU and AMS2 comparing against iRacing and how dev times are limited. Here he mentioned dev times are limited. He was actually referring to AMS2 made by Reza, which is mostly composed of ex-Luminous core ISI engine programmers. So there's still empathy between the employees." This has got 34 upvotes, right, guys? But obviously that's a more nuanced and rounded view. It's not as exciting and interesting as let's jump on a hate bandwagon and brigade something because there's something else that we don't like. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of hate or anger towards motorsport games and what's happened with them when they purchase licenses, what they've done with Kartcraft and IP and everything, and that part of it. Motorsport games have actually been restructured quite aggressively. I know people that work on LMU, or not that well, but I've talked with them. Really awesome people, really nice people. They're trying to do their best. They don't have enough time for genuinely like hating on stuff. They're just geeks. They're nerdy people that are critically thinking about how to improve their game with the resources they have. It's not that hard to understand, guys. But yeah, just the narratives and how much traction this has from a single comment that's been taken out of context is kind of scary. That's at the end of the day, I think it really is kind of scary because I am seeing this kind of stuff more and more. And fortunately, with sim racing, it doesn't bloody matter. Who cares? It's sim racing. That's one of the reasons why I do sim racing and content of sim racing. It doesn't matter, guys. It really doesn't matter that much. It's just good fun and a bit silly, and it's something it's a way to fiddle with knobs. That's the main reason, because we all love knobs and grass. That's the main reason. But you see this with sim racing, and this obviously happens with other stuff, and this has got worse and worse and worse, and these kind of people talking past each other, people missing the point, and a complete lack of the most basic of critical thinking is happening more and more. On the positive though, it might mean that sim racing is actually getting more popular and you're getting more people into it, and as a result it's a wider catchment, and so you're going to get more kind of weird views on things and more of the less sort of critical views on things, maybe. So maybe it's just the pains of actually becoming popular. Who knows? I just thought it was really interesting and absolutely insane. What a waste of time. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, which you shouldn't really, click the like button and subscribe. But until the next one, guys, go and check out the post yourself and enjoy wasting your time with the insanity that post is. Beautiful. It's a work of art. But I'm gonna print it out, put it in the Tape Modern. Till the next one, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care. Happy tea drinking and goodbye.